Alright, let's talk about something you probably don't think about, but absolutely should: rare earth minerals. Here's a fun fact to kick things off. And by fun, I mean mildly terrifying. China controls roughly 90% of the entire planet's processed rare earth supply. That's right, 90%. It's like discovering that one guy in your neighborhood owns 9 out of every 10 can openers. You might not care until the day comes when you desperately need to open a can of beans, and suddenly, that guy has a whole lot of power over your dinner plans. This isn't just a quirky market fact, it's a massive strategic advantage that Beijing has expertly cultivated for decades, leaving the rest of the world playing a desperate game of catch-up. So, why should you, a person who likely can't name a single rare earth element, care about this? Well, these 17 metallic elements are the secret sauce in basically everything that makes modern life, well, modern. Your smartphone, it's packed with them. The electric car you're eyeing, it can't run without them. Those giant wind turbines spinning gracefully to power our future, you guessed it, they're full of rare earths. And it goes deeper than consumer tech. These minerals are absolutely critical for America's national defense, forming the backbone of everything from F-35 fighter jets and missile guidance systems to advanced radar and sonar technology. Put simply, without a steady supply of these minerals, the technological and military might of the United States grinds to a screeching halt. The problem, of course, is that the United States has become alarmingly dependent on China for these materials. It's a classic tale of outsourcing gone wild. For years, it was cheaper and easier to just buy them from China than to deal with the messy, environmentally tricky business of mining and processing them at home. This created a glaring vulnerability in the American supply chain. When relations are good, it's a convenient arrangement. But when tensions flare up, as they so often do, China can simply threaten to turn off the tap. This gives them an incredible amount of leverage, turning a simple trade commodity into a powerful political weapon that can be wielded with devastating precision. This isn't a hypothetical threat, it's a reality we've seen play out. By controlling the supply, China can influence prices, disrupt manufacturing, and put immense pressure on entire industries. For American companies, this means living with constant uncertainty. One diplomatic spat could mean a key component for their product suddenly becomes unavailable or prohibitively expensive. It's a precarious position for a global superpower to be in, essentially handing the keys to your most advanced sectors over to your biggest geopolitical rival. It's less of a trade partnership and more like a hostage situation where the ransom is paid in neodymium and dysprosium. And recently the captor decided to tighten their grip. And now for the main event. On June 5th, in a move that sent shockwaves through Washington and Wall Street, former President Donald Trump made a blockbuster announcement. He declared that after a long and what he called a very productive phone call with Chinese President Xi Jinping, a major breakthrough had been reached. According to Trump, President Xi has agreed to restart the full and unrestricted export of rare earth minerals and magnets to the United States. This is, to put it mildly, a very big deal. It comes after months of escalating tensions that saw China slam the door on these critical exports, leaving American industries in a state of panic. The announcement came after a surprisingly lengthy 90-minute discussion between the two leaders, a rare occurrence given their recent frosty relationship. Trump, in his typical fashion, was brimming with optimism when he spoke to reporters. He painted the call as a significant turning point, a sign that the two nations were stepping back from the brink of a full-blown economic conflict. He suggested that this agreement was a personal victory, a result of his unique negotiating style and his established relationship with the Chinese leader. Of course, with any Trump announcement, the grand declaration often arrives long before the nitty-gritty details are ironed out, leaving everyone to wonder what exactly was agreed upon. This news lands in a landscape scarred by a bitter trade war. Just this past April, China retaliated against a new round of American tariffs by doing exactly what everyone feared. It restricted rare earth exports. The move was a direct shot at the heart of the U.S. economy, severely disrupting supply chains for major players in the automotive, electronics, and defense sectors. Companies from Detroit to Silicon Valley suddenly found themselves scrambling for alternatives that simply didn't exist at scale. The restriction demonstrated just how vulnerable the U.S. was and how willing China was to exploit that vulnerability when pushed. It was a strategic power play that made the world sit up and take notice. So, Trump's announcement feels like a sudden and dramatic reversal of fortune. If true, it would represent a massive de-escalation. The promise of resumed exports could breathe life back into struggling American industries and ease the immense pressure on the U.S. military's supply chain. However, crucial questions remain. Trump himself admitted that a specific timeline and the volume of resumed shipments were not yet finalized. Is this a firm commitment or a vague promise? Is it a permanent fix or just a temporary reprieve? The initial cheer from the market is tempered by a healthy dose of skepticism, as everyone waits to see if this verbal agreement will translate into actual cargo ships leaving Chinese ports. To understand why this announcement is so significant, we need to rewind the clock a bit. The relationship between the US and China has been on a roller coaster ride, and that's putting it lightly. Just last month, in May 2025, it seemed like a major truce had been called. Both sides announced a landmark trade agreement where the US would slash its blistering 145% tariffs on Chinese goods down to a more manageable 30%. In return, China promised to lower its own 125% tariffs on American products to just 10%. It was hailed as a monumental breakthrough, a moment of sanity after years of economic warfare that had rattled the global economy. But the ink on that deal was barely dry before things started to fall apart again. Shortly after the agreement was signed, Trump publicly accused China of already violating its terms, a claim that Beijing vehemently denied. Chinese officials fired back, blaming unilateral actions from the US for undermining the spirit of the deal. This public spat shattered the fragile trust that had been built and plunged the two economic giants back into a state of deep mistrust. It was this renewed hostility that directly led to China's decision to weaponize its rare earth dominance, turning a trade dispute into a strategic chokehold that targeted America's most sensitive industries. The rare earth restriction was a calculated and painful blow. For weeks, US automakers, already grappling with market shifts, faced production slowdowns. Tech companies saw their manufacturing timelines thrown into chaos. And most critically, military contractors issued stark warnings about their ability to meet production targets for essential defense hardware. The ban highlighted a fundamental weakness that had been ignored for too long. It was a wake-up call that demonstrated the urgent need for the US to develop its own domestic supply chain for these minerals, a process that is unfortunately slow, expensive, and environmentally challenging. It is against this backdrop of conflict and vulnerability that Trump's announcement of a new agreement emerged. The pressure on the American economy was becoming immense, and it seems that pressure may have forced both sides back to the negotiating table. As a potential sign of good faith, there are reports that China has already granted some temporary export licenses to its rare earth suppliers, specifically for the top 3 US automakers. This could be an olive branch, a small but concrete step to show that this time, the agreement might just stick. It's a fragile first step on a path that is still littered with obstacles. So, what does this all mean for American companies and workers? If the deal holds, the immediate effect will be a massive sigh of relief across multiple sectors. Automakers can restart production lines, tech innovators can move forward with their product roadmaps, and defense contractors can get back to building the tools the military relies on. For American workers in these industries, it means a return to stability and an easing of the uncertainty that has clouded their job security for months. The resumption of rare earth exports would act like a shot of adrenaline for the US economy, removing a critical bottleneck that was threatening to cause a significant downturn. However, the devil, as they say, is in the details, and right now, the details are incredibly sparse. The optimism generated by Trump's announcement is being heavily scrutinized by experts. Aides and officials from both the US and China are scheduled to meet today, June 9th, in London for follow-up talks. This meeting will be the true test. It's where the vague promises made on a phone call must be hammered into a concrete, verifiable agreement. They will need to iron out specifics on timelines, quantities, and verification mechanisms to ensure that this isn't just another temporary pause in the ongoing economic conflict. This episode serves as a powerful reminder of the complex and often contentious relationship between the world's 2 largest economies. Trump's announcement, whether it proves to be a lasting solution or a temporary fix, fundamentally alters the dynamic of US-China relations. It signals a potential shift away from open hostility and towards a more pragmatic, if still competitive, coexistence. The future of global trade, technological innovation, and even international security could hinge on the outcome of these next few weeks. This isn't just about minerals, it's about setting the rules of engagement for the 21st century. Ultimately, this story is far from over. The path forward is uncertain, but this new development offers a glimmer of hope. It highlights the deep interdependence of the US and Chinese economies, showing that even in the midst of fierce rivalry, both sides have reasons to pull back from the brink. Now, the ball is in the court of the diplomats and negotiators meeting in London. We invite you to share your thoughts on this potential deal in the comments below. Do you think this is a real breakthrough or just political theater? To stay updated, be sure to check out our related stories on the future of US-China trade.